Driving back from a late high school football game that I was covering, I was going through a very remote section of highway and farmland. I was a little zoned out, but the road was straight and wide for a while. I was going along at a good clip when I was vaguely aware that there was suddenly something in my way, but it was almost just a sense of it, not anything I could really see. Something just didn't look right, and I could tell hitting the brakes was not going to help, so I swerved into the opposing lane and passed something large that had been blocking my lane. I still didn't know what it was, but it was large. I got turned around and went back slowly to see what the hell I had barely missed. When I got close enough to see better in my headlights, there they were, two very large, completely black cows. They were big enough that my hatchback would have been totally crushed if I'd hit them, and it could have easily been a fatal accident, for me and the cows. I called the local police and they sent a car out while I waited to make sure no one else hit them, even though the cows wandered off the roadways and I hadn't seen another car for quite a while. When they got there, they knew whom the cows belonged to and called the guy up all pissed off because this apparently happened more frequently than they liked. TLDR, damn cows nearly killed me. About 20 years ago, I was driving home from a late wedding DJ gig. I was driving south on a major interstate which was relatively empty at 2:30 a.m. or so. At one point, in the narrows, the retaining walls on each side get very high as the highway snakes underneath overpasses. Out of nowhere, a young woman jumped down from the retaining wall onto the highway and directly in front of my car. I hit the brakes hard, came to a complete stop, and nearly slammed into her. She looked up, ran to my passenger door and got in looking terrified. She looked between 16 and 20 years old, long blonde hair, and her clothes looked a little dirty. Not homeless dirty, but like she'd fallen down a few times. "I just need to call my mom," she said. I tried to calm her down and began moving back down the highway, and behind me about 50 feet, I see another figure jump down onto the highway out of my rearview window. I didn't mention this to her and she didn't look back or see the other person. I sped up and went about 4 or 5 exits south. She kept saying over and over, "I just need to call my mom." This was before most people had cell phones, so I told her I would take her to one of the 24-hour grocery stores and she could call her mom. I asked her if she needed money for a payphone, what was wrong, etc. She said nothing other than, "I just need to call my mom." I pulled up to the grocery store and stopped. She got out quickly, but not running, then ducked into the grocery. She didn't say a word to me or look back. I pulled into the gas station across the street and called 911 and told them the entire story and let them know the young woman was inside the grocery store and a description of her. I have no idea what happened. I don't know why she did that, what happened to her, who the figure behind us on the highway was, nothing. Really made me super uneasy. I think I did the right thing. I would have tried to do more, but she seemed really fragile emotionally and somewhat afraid of me. I am a guy, so I wanted her to just be able to get to where she needed to be. Was driving with some friends at around 2 a.m., rainy cold night, along a winding section of road with a steep drop off to the river below. On one side we pass a small pull-off and notice a car with no lights on. As we drive by we catch a glimpse of a person standing next to it, and as the headlights hit him we see his shirt is covered in blood all down the front. We don't stop, but turn around and drive back slowly. I roll down my window as we approach, and he just stands there, blood all over his shirt and pants. His car looks fine, couldn't have been a crash. Out the window, I ask if he's okay, and over the pounding rain and roar of the river below I hear the most distant and sorrow "I'm fine." Gave me chills. I don't reply and slowly drive off as my buddy calls the cops. About half an hour later we drive by again and there is an ambulance and a couple of cruisers. It turns out the guy slit his wrists and was going to jump off into the river, cold, rainy and pitch black. Scary where your mind can take you. A couple of friends and I were coming home from a late afternoon/night hike a few weeks ago, and we decided to pull over near a rundown rest stop so my friend could use the bathroom and the rest of us could stretch our legs. It was maybe 8 p.m. and it's winter here, so it was pitch black. This area is just thick trees and bushland, so there's no houses or campgrounds or whatever around. I believe there used to be, but they moved the campground somewhere else because it's on the side of a mountain and it was too dangerous. As we were all getting back into the car, I felt sort of uneasy. I didn't want to mention it because I didn't want my friends to make a big joke about it, but someone else spoke up and said they felt uncomfortable too, and that we should get out of there. We all agreed, and as soon as my friend started the car, these lights flickered on in the middle of the trees. We kinda stared at them for a moment. I wanna say there were 6 or 7 of them. 2 of them were higher than the others, and then the rest were in a line below them. They kind of bobbed, like somebody was holding a torch or something, but they were way brighter than a torch. We started reversing out of the car park, the car still facing these lights, when suddenly they just sped at us through the trees. I don't know how to explain it, it looked like they were zooming towards us super fast. We were terrified and my friend just flung us out and got the hell out of there. I'd have just told myself it was people in the woods, except when we were driving down the road at 60 km/h, we could still see them trailing behind us in the trees, keeping pace. After a couple of seconds, they just disappeared and the rest of the way home was uneventful as ever. We have absolutely no idea what that could have been. As far as I know, you can't get vehicles into the area since it's overgrown and dangerous, and I don't know that any person can keep up with a car like that. I'm not a big believer in aliens and UFOs and stuff, but TBH, if you told me that's what we saw, I wouldn't be surprised. I had something creepy happen to me a few months ago. I was driving home after seeing a play with a friend of mine, so it was probably around 11:30 p.m. 12:00 a.m. Also, I live in rural America, so there weren't any street lamps or houses for the majority of the drive. I was driving over this bridge and saw a car sitting on the side of the road turned on. I wasn't really concerned about it because it's a common spot for cars to pull off, even if it was kind of late. As I passed the car, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw that they had pulled out behind me. Again, I didn't really think anything of it. Until they began to tailgate me hard. While that behavior isn't unheard of, it tends to be rare since the road is curvy and a hotspot for deer. I kept driving for a bit with this car right up on me, which caused me to feel frustrated, confused, and strangely paranoid. Then, the car's headlights went out abruptly while I was nearing the end of a stretch of road surrounded completely by forest. This made me freak the fuck out because it was still super close behind me. Then, the car sped up and went around me, but almost immediately slowed down to a standstill in front of me. At this point I was so afraid, so I sped up, went around the car, and drove way too fast to get home and then sprinted inside and locked the door. I didn't notice the car around my house, but I still feel worrisome about the entire ordeal and wish I knew why someone would drive like that. When I was a kid, living in Charleston, South Carolina, my dad took me and my brother to a boat landing on a creek, right off of the Intracoastal Waterway to shoot off some fireworks we had left over from the 4th. This boat landing was up in the sticks in a place called Wadmalaw Island, very sparsely populated and pitch black at night. When we pulled in the parking lot of the boat landing, around 11 p.m., there was a 20-ish foot power boat nestled against the dock. The only people there were several guys wearing white boots and loading the back of an SUV with boxes from the boat. There was also a sports car, not sure what kind. We instantly got the heebie-jeebies, turned around and hauled ass. About 30 seconds later, there was a car speeding towards us in the rearview mirror. We were already going 80 miles per hour, because my dad was convinced it was drug-related, and it was gaining very quickly on us. We knew we couldn't outrun them. My dad drove an '81 Audi Fox, so before we went around a curve in the road, we killed the headlights and pulled into the driveway of someone's house, ducked down and waited. That car that was chasing us flew by, must have been going 100 miles per hour, easily. We sat there for a few minutes and saw the car going back to the boat landing. Shit could have ended very differently. I'm guessing cocaine shipment? My friend and I used to go drive around our little country town at all times of the day. We'd chat, listen to music, and just sort of drive around for no real reason. One night, we decided we were bored and that we should just take a drive around the backcountry roads and just chill out. The roads were just two-way, one lane each, with a speed limit of 45 to 55, I think. So, we pull out from my parents' house and start cruising down a normal road that we take. We pull up to the normal four-way stop and then keep heading out toward the country where the road gets a little bit more rough. On top of this, because it's actually out in the country, there isn't really any light aside from either the moon or the few houses that you pass on the way out. So, on the way out, I start getting this really weird feeling. I've driven this road tons of times before at night and I've never had this feeling before. It felt like a stone in my stomach along with some chills that were going up my legs and my arms. Around the time that I started feeling this, there was a car coming toward us going the opposite direction. We were maybe a mile or so away from one another, probably a bit more than that. My friend and I were still just talking and not really paying much attention to the car coming toward us. As it got closer, I remember feeling particularly uncomfortable and the conversation between my friend and I just sort of stopped abruptly. The car that was coming toward us was basically right in front of us at this point and it was about 2 to 3 yards in front of my car before it flipped its headlights off and veered into our lane, aimed directly at my car. This was all split second, backcountry road, pitch black, and headlights coming toward us just cut off completely. I, by some miracle, managed to swerve to the right, not too violently, to get out of the way. My friend and I were shaken as fuck. I checked my mirrors and just saw the car flip its headlights back on and continue driving from the way we came. I think my friend and I had 5 to 6 cigarettes between us on the drive home, and we decided to cut the drive extremely short because of this weird shit. I still have no valid explanation other than maybe it was some drunk dude in a car just fucking around with us. Even writing this, I still get heavy chills lol. It was pretty wild. Once when I was 19 I got off work early at about 3 a.m. I always took the back roads to avoid dealing with highways, and really it was almost a straight road directly south of my job to get home. There aren't any street lights, and once you go about 2 miles it turns into dirt road with a few 4-way stops. On this night it's foggy and visibility is crazy low, so I'm only doing about 30 miles an hour. As I come up to one of the 4-way stops, there's a house tucked back from the corner with an old lamppost in the middle of the yard, basically halfway between the intersection and the house. I had been intentionally looking for this lamppost as it was a good indicator of how far I'd gone down the road, as the fog was very thick and I was a bit nervous about it. I stop at the intersection and look over at the lamppost and see a man or a man-like figure standing beside it. Just standing there. At 3 a.m. on a foggy night. Goosebumps from head to toe and the hair on the back of my neck stood straight out, and I immediately felt unsafe. The figure never moved as I drove through the intersection, but the rest of the trip was dirt road with high rows of cornfield on both sides. I'm doing 30 miles per hour, terrified, heart racing, just knowing at any moment that figure is going to walk out from the cornfields into the road and I'm gonna be murdered. Nothing did happen and I made it home just fine, but to this day it still gives me chills thinking about that figure. And just to be clear, I'd driven by that house countless times in the past and again after that. It wasn't a scarecrow or anything of the sort. My time to shine. Not unexplainable, but scary enough to make me shit a brick. This happened to me 3 years ago. I used to throw newspapers for the Kansas City Star. And if you know anything about modern-day newspaper delivery, it isn't anything like little Timmy throwing a small bundle in the morning before school for his lunch money. I threw 1,500 papers a night. Yes. 1,500 fucking papers. And you do it at night. Night as in, pick your newspapers up at midnight and throw until 6 in the morning. You have to roll them yourself, stuff ads in them, the works. It is a terribly arduous job, but pays well above minimum wage when you have a large route like I had. Anywho, one night I am throwing newspapers in a little place called Holt, Missouri. It's about 45 minutes from Kansas City limits. I am throwing these out my window when suddenly I realize the same pair of headlights keeps passing me. It's too dark out in the middle of nowhere to make out the vehicle well, but it was no doubt an SUV or Suburban. I stopped my car and watched it as it rolled past me and went a good quarter mile down the road before, sure enough, it makes a large awkward U-turn back around. It does it a few more times before I finish my papers on that stretch of road and turn around. This road was a completely flat and straight road for several miles with no light pollution. Only a few driveways for farmers and what have you that live out there. We called them bitch roads, because you had to drive so far only to throw a few papers. As I am driving back I realize the blinding headlights of the vehicle pestering me are no longer moving towards my own. They are stopped in the middle of the road. With barely enough room to pass I lay on the horn and scream a few choice words as I fly past them. I will forever regret doing that. I was under the impression it was just a couple hillbillies drunk and wanting to start trouble. Even going 50 miles per hour past them and going a ways down the road, I heard their tires screech and the engine rev. Whatever it was, they had it souped up. Quickly, the situation turned fucky. Very, very, fucky. They get on my ass within seconds, and my poor little beater wouldn't be able to outrun them even if it grew a dick and I dangled a naked lady in front of it. They ram my ass end and the unmistakable pop of gunshots goes off. They shoot several times, one bullet busting out my back window and whizzing past my head. In a panic, I did the only thing that came to mind and screeched Tokyo Drift style into a farmer's field adjacent to his gravel driveway. The truck follows, but seemed to hit something hard and went careening past the driveway into the other half of the field. I gun it down to this guy's house. I have never met him before. Perfect stranger. I haul ass out of my car and begin banging on the door like a madman, hoping and praying I don't get shot by either the persons in the killer mobile or the farmer I am waking up. The vehicle isn't very far away from me when almost every light in the house turns on at once. The vehicle screeches to a stop and pulls around. I see that it is in fact an old-style Suburban, with massive wheels and no license plates. Of fucking course, I almost got deliveranced. A large burly man wearing nothing but some boxers and several other guys greet me at the door, one brandishing a rifle. In the end it all worked out. By chance, the man was getting married in the morning and all of his buddies were over for his bachelor party. Thank God not all of them got blackout drunk. I filed a police report, yet nothing ever came of it. No other reports ever came of a beat-up Suburban with no license plates. I started carrying my pistol in my delivery car after that. My vehicle had 7 bullet holes and the back bumper was missing. The thing that fucks me up the most is we never found my bumper. Just, poof. They ram it, it disappeared. Maybe they took it as a souvenir. No doubt, for a second there I really thought I was going to die. About 6 years ago, my family and I moved from the West Coast to the Midwest. Dad and I drove while my mom and younger siblings flew. Dad was driving the U-Haul and I was driving the van that we had at the time. We stopped for dinner around 8 and realized we had about 6 hours of driving left and decided to push on through. GPS took us a very weird way and had us exit on a rural route highway instead of staying on the interstate. So we are following this little windy road for what seems like forever. It's just past midnight when all of a sudden we are in this little town. Everything seems old and the houses feel like they are 10 feet from the road. There's not a single street light in this town, so the only light is from our cars. We get to the house and my dad doesn't say anything about the town, so I assume it was my mind playing tricks on me. A few days later I tell the story to my mom and she tells me Dad told her the exact same story but thought since I didn't mention it that it must have been his mind playing tricks. I've tried to find this town again on many occasions and I have never had any luck.